The stars shimmered like scattered diamonds against the black void of space. Commander Vexhai stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the alien star system grow larger through the viewing ports. His crystalline ship gleamed with polished surfaces that caught and reflected starlight. Behind him, 11 more vessels followed in perfect formation. Each ship looked like a work of art, all smooth curves and flowing lines. Vexahai's 4 arms moved gracefully as he checked the control panels. His scaled skin glowed with a soft blue light that showed his excitement. After 300 years of life, he still felt the thrill of meeting new species. But this feeling came with confidence. The Zephyrian Empire had never met a species they could not defeat or absorb into their growing civilization. "Commander," said his second officer, Kethra. Her voice made a musical sound through the ship's communication system. "We are approaching the 3rd planet of this system. Our scouts confirmed that the beings here call themselves humans." Vexhai nodded his elongated head. The humans were young, barely having left their home planet a few centuries ago. Their technology seemed primitive compared to Zephyrian standards. They used chemical rockets and metal ships instead of the elegant energy-based systems that the Empire had perfected over thousands of years. "What do we know about their military capabilities?" Vexhai asked. Kethra touched a control surface and holographic displays filled the air around them. Images of human ships appeared, looking crude and angular. They were covered in what appeared to be simple metal armor, with visible weapon ports and engine exhausts. "Their vessels are built like ancient warships," she reported, "heavy, slow, and inefficient. They seem to rely on kinetic weapons and nuclear energy. Our energy shields should easily deflect anything they can produce." Vexhai studied the images with interest. The human ships looked nothing like the graceful vessels of other civilizations the Empire had encountered. Most species tried to copy Zephyrian designs once they saw their superiority, but humans seemed to have developed their own path, even if it appeared to be a dead end. "Sir," came another voice from the communication station, "we are receiving a transmission from the humans. They are requesting a meeting." "Put it through," Vexhai commanded. The main display flickered and showed a human female. She had short dark hair and wore a blue uniform with metal insignia. Her face looked calm and professional. Behind her, Vexhai could see what appeared to be a ship's bridge, but it looked nothing like the elegant control centers he was used to. Everything appeared functional but rough, made of metal and filled with blinking lights. "Greetings," the human said. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Indomitable. On behalf of humanity, I welcome you to our solar system." Vexhai activated his own communication system. The translation devices would convert his words into the human language. "I am Commander Vexhai of the Zephyrian Empire. We come in the interest of galactic peace and unity." Captain Chen nodded politely. "We appreciate your peaceful intentions, Commander. We would be honored to meet with you and discuss our civilizations. Perhaps we can arrange a formal diplomatic exchange?" This was going exactly as Vexhai expected. The humans seemed friendly and willing to cooperate. Most species were eager to join the Empire once they understood the benefits. Advanced technology, protection from hostile forces, and access to galactic trade networks made the choice obvious. "We would be pleased to meet," Vexhai replied. "However, I should inform you that the Zephyrian Empire has a standard procedure for welcoming new species into our galactic community. Integration is typically swift and beneficial for all parties involved." Captain Chen's expression did not change, but Vexhai noticed her eyes become slightly harder. "Integration, Commander? Could you explain what that means exactly?" "Certainly," Vexhai said, his tone remaining diplomatic but firm. "Your planet would become part of the Empire. Your people would receive the benefits of our advanced technology and protection. Your military forces would be disbanded, as they would no longer be necessary. Your government would be restructured according to our proven administrative methods." The bridge behind Captain Chen became very quiet. Vexhai could see other humans at their stations, but none of them moved or spoke. The silence stretched for several seconds. "I see," Captain Chen finally said. "And if we prefer to maintain our independence?" Vexhai had heard this question many times before. Young civilizations often had trouble understanding the reality of their situation. "Captain, I respect your people's desire for autonomy. However, the galaxy is a dangerous place. There are hostile forces that regularly threaten developing worlds. The Empire has the responsibility to protect all sentient life. Independence is rarely a viable option for species at your technological level. Our technological level? Captain Chen asked. Her voice remained polite, but there was something in her tone that Vexhai could not identify. Please do not take offense, he said quickly. Your people have achieved remarkable things for such a young civilization. But the Empire has been exploring space for over 10,000 years. We have energy weapons that can destroy entire cities, shields that have never been penetrated, and faster-than-light travel that allows us to coordinate across vast distances. Captain Chen listened without interrupting. When Vexhai finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke carefully. Commander, I appreciate your concern for our safety. However, humanity has faced many challenges in our short time among the stars. We have learned to be very good at protecting ourselves. I would like to respectfully decline your offer of integration. Vexhai felt a familiar disappointment. This always made things more complicated. But he had dealt with resistant species before. Usually a demonstration of superior technology was enough to change their minds. Captain Chen, I hope you will reconsider. The Empire does not wish to use force, but we cannot allow potentially hostile civilizations to remain unmonitored in this region of space. Perhaps a demonstration of our capabilities would help you understand the benefits of cooperation. A demonstration? Captain Chen asked. Nothing harmful, Vexhai assured her. Simply a display of our defensive and offensive systems. Many species find it helpful to see the technology they would have access to as members of the Empire. Captain Chen was quiet for a long moment. Around her bridge, Vexhai could see the other humans watching their captain carefully. Finally, she spoke. Very well, Commander. If you believe a demonstration would be helpful, we are willing to observe your capabilities. However, I would like to request 24 hours to consider your proposal after your demonstration. Of course, Vexhai agreed. We will begin the demonstration at your convenience. Shall we say in 1 hour? That would be acceptable. Captain Chen out. The communication ended and the bridge returned to its normal activity. Kethra moved to stand beside her commander. Sir, should we prepare the full battle formation? She asked. Vexhai shook his head. That will not be necessary. A simple display should be sufficient. These humans seem reasonable. Once they see what our weapons can do, they will understand that resistance is pointless. He looked out at the crude human battleship that waited in the distance. The vessel looked like it had been built in a factory, rather than grown in the elegant biofoundries that created Zephyrian ships. Its angular hull and visible weapon systems seemed almost primitive. Prepare 3 ships for the demonstration, Vexhai ordered. We will show them our plasma cannons and shield systems. Nothing too dramatic. We want to impress them, not terrify them. As his crew prepared for the demonstration, Vexhai felt confident that this would end like all the others. The humans would see the overwhelming superiority of Zephyrian technology and make the practical choice. Within a few days, Earth would be another peaceful member of the Empire. He had no way of knowing that he was about to encounter something completely outside his experience. 1 hour later, Vexhai watched as 3 of his finest warships moved into position. The vessels sparkled in the light of the human star, their crystalline hulls catching and bending the sunlight into beautiful rainbow patterns. Each ship was over 1 kilometer long and had taken decades to grow in the biofoundries of the Empire. The human battleship hung motionless in space, waiting. Even from this distance, Vexhai could see the crude construction of the vessel. Its hull was dark gray metal covered with sensor arrays, weapon turrets, and communication equipment. Where Zephyrian ships were smooth and organic-looking, the human ship was all angles and hard edges. It looked more like a floating fortress than a proper starship. Demonstration fleet in position, Commander, reported Kethra from her station. All weapons and shields are ready. Open communication with the human vessel, Vexhai ordered. Captain Chen's face appeared on the screen again. Behind her, the crude human bridge was filled with activity. Crew members worked at their stations, which were covered with physical controls and displays. Vexhai could not understand why they had not developed the elegant mental interfaces that made Zephyrian ships so efficient. Captain Chen, he said with a diplomatic smile, we are ready to begin our demonstration. Please observe carefully. We are watching, Commander, she replied. Her voice was calm, but Vexhai noticed that more humans had gathered on her bridge. They all watched the displays with intense attention. Vexhai turned to his weapons officer. Begin with a shield demonstration. Full power. The 3 Zephyrian ships began to glow with a soft blue energy. The shields that protected them became visible as shimmering barriers around each vessel. These shields had protected the Empire's fleets for thousands of years. No weapon in the known galaxy could penetrate them. As you can see, Vexhai explained to Captain Chen, our defensive systems create an energy barrier around each ship. These shields can absorb the energy from entire star systems if necessary. They have never been broken by any weapon we have encountered. Captain Chen nodded politely. Very impressive, Commander. Your technology is certainly advanced. Vexhai felt pleased by her response. The humans seemed to be understanding the situation. Now for the second part of the demonstration. Weapons officer, he commanded. Target the asteroid field beyond the human ship. Full power plasma discharge. The three ships aligned themselves carefully. Vexhai wanted to make sure the humans could see everything clearly. The weapon systems began to charge, creating a humming sound that filled the bridge. Energy collectors throughout the ship gathered power from the ship's core reactor. Our plasma weapons, Vexhai explained, can destroy entire cities with a single shot. The energy beam travels at nearly the speed of light and can penetrate any known armor material. The weapons fired simultaneously. 3 brilliant beams of superheated plasma shot across space, striking the asteroid field in perfect synchronization. The rocks simply disappeared, vaporized instantly by the incredible heat. Where there had been floating chunks of stone and metal, now there was nothing but glowing gas that quickly dispersed into space. The human bridge was completely silent. Vexhai could see the crew members staring at their displays with wide eyes. Captain Chen herself looked impressed, though she was trying to hide it. The Empire has 17 different civilizations who chose to join us after seeing demonstrations like this one, Vexhai said gently. Each of them has prospered under our protection and guidance. Your people could have access to this same technology. Captain Chen was quiet for several seconds. When she spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. Commander, your weapons are certainly powerful, but I must ask you to consider something. What if we prefer to remain independent? What if we believe we can protect ourselves? Vexhai had expected this response. Young civilizations often overestimated their own abilities. It was natural for them to feel proud of their achievements, even when those achievements were insignificant compared to what the Empire had accomplished. Captain, I understand your people's pride in what you have built, but please consider the reality of your situation. Your ships use primitive chemical propulsion and simple metal armor. Your weapons appear to be basic kinetic systems and nuclear devices. Against enemies with our level of technology, these would be completely useless. He could see the humans exchanging glances on their bridge. Some of them looked concerned, but others seemed almost amused. Vexhai found their reactions confusing. Perhaps another demonstration would be helpful, he continued. Something that shows the practical applications of our technology in a defensive situation. What did you have in mind, Commander? Captain Chen asked. Vexhai thought for a moment. He wanted to make his point clear without being too aggressive. These humans seemed reasonable, and he did not want to frighten them unnecessarily. We could perform a simulated attack on your vessel, he suggested. Nothing dangerous, of course. We would use our weapons at minimal power, just enough to show you how easily our technology could disable your defenses. It would be completely safe. Captain Chen looked around her bridge. Vexhai could see her crew watching her carefully, waiting for her decision. The atmosphere on the human ship seemed tense, but not in the way he expected. Instead of fear, there seemed to be anticipation. Very well, Captain Chen said finally. But I want to be clear about something, Commander. If you attack our ship, even in a demonstration, we will consider it an act of hostility. Of course, Vexhai agreed quickly. This is purely educational. We simply want to show you what would happen in a real combat situation, so you can understand why cooperation is preferable to conflict. I understand. Proceed with your demonstration. Vexhai felt confident that this would end the negotiations quickly. Once the humans saw how easily their ship could be disabled, they would have no choice but to accept the Empire's protection. It was always better when species chose to join voluntarily. Weapons officer, he commanded. Minimum power setting. Target the human vessel's weapon systems. We want to disable, not destroy. The targeting systems locked onto the human battleship. Vexhai could see the crude weapon turrets that dotted its hull. The plasma beams would melt those systems in seconds, leaving the ship helpless but intact. It would be a perfect demonstration of superior technology used with restraint. Fire, he ordered. 3 beams of plasma shot across the space between the fleets. Even at minimum power, They were bright enough to light up the darkness between the ships. The beams struck the human vessel exactly where the targeting computers had aimed them. Vex-High waited for the inevitable result. The human weapon system should have been destroyed instantly. The ship's crew should have been sending frantic messages about system failures and hull breaches. Captain Chen should have been requesting immediate ceasefire and surrender. Instead, nothing happened. The plasma beam struck the human ship and simply disappeared. There was no explosion, no hull breach, no system failure. The dark gray armor did not even show scorch marks where the energy had hit it. "Weapons, officer," Vex-High said slowly. "Were our weapons functioning properly?" The officer checked his displays with growing confusion. "Yes, Commander. All systems operating at normal parameters. Energy discharge was within expected ranges." Vex-High stared at the human ship in disbelief. It was impossible. No material in the known galaxy could simply absorb that much energy without showing some kind of damage. Even their own ships would have had minor hull scarring from such an attack. On the communication screen, Captain Chen's expression had changed. She was no longer trying to look impressed or diplomatic. Instead, she was looking directly at Vex-High with an expression he had never seen before. It was not fear or anger or surprise, it was pity. "Commander Vex-High," she said quietly, "was that supposed to be an attack?" The bridge of Vex-High's flagship fell completely silent. Every member of his crew stared at their displays in shock. The question Captain Chen had just asked echoed in the crystalline chamber like a physical blow. Was that supposed to be an attack? Vex-High felt his confidence crumble. In 300 years of life and dozens of first contact situations, nothing like this had ever happened. His weapons had simply failed to affect the human ship in any way. It was as if they had fired their plasma beams into empty space. "Run a full diagnostic on all weapon systems," he commanded, his voice barely steady. "Check for equipment failure or targeting errors." His weapons officer worked frantically at the control surfaces. Holographic displays filled the air around his station as he ran system checks. After several minutes, he looked up with confusion clear in his large eyes. "All systems are functioning perfectly, Commander. Our plasma cannons are operating at peak efficiency. Targeting was accurate to within 0.01%. The beams definitely struck the human vessel." On the communication screen, Captain Chen waited patiently. Behind her, the human crew continued their work as if nothing unusual had happened. None of them seemed surprised or concerned that their ship had just absorbed an attack that should have crippled it. "Commander," Kethra said quietly from beside him, "perhaps their armor is made from some unknown material. Something that absorbs energy differently than we expect?" Vex-High nodded slowly. It was the only logical explanation. The humans must have discovered some new type of defensive technology. But if that was true, it meant they were far more advanced than they appeared. "Captain Chen," he said, trying to keep his voice diplomatic, "it appears your ship has some impressive defensive capabilities. Perhaps we underestimated your technological development." Captain Chen's expression did not change. "Perhaps you did, Commander. But I believe you wanted to demonstrate your superior technology. Please continue." There was something in her tone that made Vex-High uncomfortable. It was not mockery exactly, but there was a confidence there that he did not understand. How could she be so calm when his fleet clearly outgunned her single ship? "Weapons officer," he said, his voice growing firmer. "Increase power to 50%. All three ships concentrated fire. "Sir," his officer said hesitantly, 50% power could cause serious damage to their ship. If their crew is injured, "They asked for a demonstration," Vex-High replied. "We will give them one they cannot ignore." The three Zephyrian ships repositioned themselves for better targeting angles. Their weapon systems began charging again, this time drawing much more power from their reactors. The humming sound grew louder as energy built up in the plasma cannons. "Captain Chen," Vex-High announced, "we are increasing the power of our demonstration. This should give you a better understanding of what our weapons can accomplish." "Understood, Commander. We are ready." The weapons fired again. This time the plasma beams were noticeably brighter, carrying enough energy to vaporize a small moon. They struck the human battleship in exactly the same spots as before, concentrating their power on what appeared to be the most vulnerable sections of the hull. The result was identical. The energy simply disappeared into the dark gray armor without leaving any trace. No explosion, no heat signature, no damage of any kind. It was as if the most powerful weapons in the Zephyrian arsenal were completely ineffective. Vexhai stared at his displays in growing alarm. This was impossible according to everything he knew about physics and warfare. No defensive system should be able to absorb that much energy without some kind of reaction. Full sensor scan of the human vessel, he ordered. I want to know what we are dealing with. The scanning systems focused their attention on the human battleship. Vexhai expected to see some kind of energy field or exotic matter configuration that would explain what was happening. Instead, the sensors returned readings that made no sense at all. Commander, his science officer reported, the scans are showing anomalous results. The human ship appears to have a mass reading that exceeds our instrument's ability to measure accurately. The hull composition is unknown to our databases, and there are energy signatures inside the vessel that register beyond our scale limits. That is impossible, Vexhai said. Run the scans again. I have run them 3 times, sir. The results are consistent. According to our sensors, that ship should not be able to exist under normal physics. On the communication screen, Captain Chen cleared her throat politely. Commander Vexhai, I believe it is our turn for a demonstration. Your turn? Vexhai repeated. You have shown us your weapons and shields. Now I would like to show you ours. With your permission, of course. Vexhai felt a chill run through his body. Something in Captain Chen's tone had changed. The politeness was still there, but underneath it was something much harder. Something that reminded him of the few truly dangerous predators he had encountered in his travels. What kind of demonstration did you have in mind? He asked carefully. Since you opened hostilities by attacking our vessel, I think it would be appropriate to show you why humanity earned its place among the stars through warfare, not diplomacy. The human battleship began to move. It had been completely motionless during the Zephyrian attack, but now it started a slow rotation. The massive vessel turned with surprising grace for something so large and angular. As it moved, sections of its hull began to retract. What Vexhai had taken for simple armor plating slid away to reveal weapon systems that dwarfed anything he had ever seen. Gun barrels emerged that were larger than entire Zephyrian fighters. Launch tubes opened that could accommodate missiles the size of small ships. Dear ancestors, Kethra whispered beside him. Commander, those weapons... I see them, Vexhai said quietly. But the human ship was not finished revealing its secrets. More hull sections retracted, showing layer after layer of weapon systems, energy projectors that glowed with barely contained power, particle accelerators that stretched the length of the vessel, and in the center of it all something that made Vexhai's blood freeze in his veins. It was a single gun barrel, easily 100 meters across. As he watched, it began to emerge from the ship's core, extending forward like the stinger of some impossible insect. Energy readings from his sensors went completely off their scales as the weapon began to charge. Captain Chen, he said, his voice barely a whisper. What is that? Captain Chen's expression was completely calm. That, Commander, is a lesson in assumptions. You assumed that because our ships look crude, our technology is primitive. You assumed that because we are young, we are weak. You assumed that because you have never lost a battle, you never will. The massive weapon continued to charge. Vexhai could see energy building inside it like a trapped star. His instruments were screaming warnings about power levels that exceeded anything in their databases. This is our smallest ship-to-ship weapon, Captain Chen continued conversationally. We call it a mass driver. It accelerates projectiles to a significant percentage of light speed using controlled gravity fields. The projectiles themselves are made from compressed matter that we harvest from the cores of dead stars. Vexhai tried to speak but found his voice had deserted him. The weapon system he was looking at could destroy planets, not just the surface but crack the actual planet apart. And Captain Chen was telling him this was their smallest weapon? You wanted to know about our defensive capabilities, she said. Our hull armor is made from materials that exist in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Your plasma weapons only affect 3 of those dimensions, which is why they had no effect whatsoever. The human ship had completed its rotation and was now pointing directly at Vexhai's flagship. The massive weapon at its center pulsed with contained energy that made the space around it bend visibly. Commander, Captain Chen said, her voice taking on a tone of deadly seriousness, I am going to fire a single shot from our point defense system. Not our main weapon, not even one of our secondary guns. Our point defense system. I want you to observe what happens to your shields. Captain, please, Vexhai managed to say. There is no need for violence. We can negotiate. The time for negotiation ended when you attacked my ship, she replied. This is a lesson, Commander. Pay attention. A much smaller weapon system emerged from the human battleship's hull. Compared to the massive gun in the center, it looked almost insignificant. But Vexhi's sensors immediately registered energy levels that matched their own main weapons. "Firing in 3 seconds," Captain Chen announced. Vexhi opened his mouth to order his fleet to retreat, but he was too late. The human weapon fired with no visible beam or projectile. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then space itself seemed to ripple around his flagship. His shields, which had never been penetrated in the history of the Empire, simply ceased to exist. The bridge erupted into chaos as warning signals screamed from every station. Vexhi watched in horror as his flagship's shields, which had protected Zephyrian vessels for millennia, collapsed like soap bubbles in a hurricane. But the human weapon was not finished. The projectile that had destroyed his shields continued on its path with devastating purpose. It struck his flagship's crystalline hull with an impact that sent shockwaves through the entire vessel. The beautiful organic curves of Zephyrian engineering meant nothing to the human projectile. It punched through the ship's armor as if it were made of paper. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red as primary systems failed one after another. The projectile had not just damaged the ship, it had passed completely through it, emerging from the other side and continuing into space. In its wake, it left a perfectly circular hole that went from bow to stern. "Hull breach on deck 7 through 23, shouted his damage control officer. "Emergency force fields are holding, but structural integrity is at 30% and falling." Vexhi grabbed his command chair to steady himself as the ship shook from secondary explosions. Through the viewing ports, he could see debris from his own vessel floating past. The projectile had carved through critical systems, leaving a trail of destruction that threatened the ship's survival. "Sir," Kethra called from her station, "the Harmony and the Radiance are requesting permission to engage the human vessel." "No," Vexhi shouted immediately. "All ships maintain defensive positions only. Do not fire on the human ship." He looked at the communication screen where Captain Chen waited with the same calm expression she had worn throughout the encounter. Behind her, the human crew worked efficiently at their stations as if nothing unusual had happened. "Captain Chen," he said, his voice shaking despite his efforts to control it. "You have made your point. Please, no more demonstrations." "Commander," she replied, "that projectile was fired from what we consider a point defense weapon. It is designed to stop incoming missiles and small attack craft, not to engage capital ships. Would you like to see what our actual ship-to-ship weapons can do?" Vexhi looked at the massive gun barrel that still protruded from the center of the human battleship. Energy readings from that weapon were still climbing, building toward levels that his instruments could not even measure properly. If a point defense system could cripple his flagship, what would their main weapon do? "That will not be necessary," he said quickly. "I believe we understand each other now, do we?" Captain Chen asked. "Because I am not certain that you do, Commander. Let me explain something about humanity that your intelligence gathering missed." She leaned forward slightly in her chair, and for the first time Vexhi saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. It was not anger or hatred. It was the look of a predator that had been playing with its prey and was now ready to end the game. "We are not a young species exploring space for the first time," she said. "We have been preparing for this moment for over 2 centuries. Every ship we build, every weapon we design, every defensive system we develop has been created with one purpose in mind." "What purpose?" Vexhi asked, though he was not sure he wanted to hear the answer. "To fight enemies that make your empire look like children playing with toys." The words hit Vexhi like physical blows. Around his bridge, his crew stopped their emergency repairs to listen with growing terror. Captain Chen continued, her voice taking on an almost educational tone. "You see, Commander, when humanity first left Earth, we discovered that the galaxy is not a peaceful place. We found the ruins of civilizations that had been wiped out by forces beyond imagination. We encountered automated war machines left behind by extinct species. We made contact with entities that exist outside normal space-time and consider entire solar systems to be snacks." She gestured casually at the massive weapon systems visible on her ship's hull. "Every weapon you see here was designed to fight enemies that could destroy your entire empire without noticing. Self-replicating machines that consume whole star systems. Energy beings that exist in quantum flux states. Hive minds that span multiple galaxies." Vexhi felt his understanding of the galaxy crumble around him. The Zephyrian Empire considered itself the pinnacle of galactic civilization, They had never encountered any force they could not defeat or absorb, but Captain Chen was describing threats that were so far beyond their capabilities that they might as well be gods. The ship you are facing right now, she continued, is not even one of our primary warships. The Indomitable is classified as a patrol vessel. We use it for routine border security and escort duties. Our actual battle fleets are hidden in the outer regions of this solar system, where they have been waiting for someone like you to arrive. Someone like us? Vexhai whispered. An aggressive species that believes strength gives them the right to conquer others. We have encountered your type before, Commander. Sometimes they can be reasoned with. Sometimes they must be stopped permanently. The threat was clear, but there was no bluster or emotion in Captain Chen's voice. She was simply stating facts like a teacher explaining a mathematical equation to a student. Your plasma weapons, she said, are impressive by galactic standards, but we face enemies that attack with weaponized black holes and reality-warping technologies. Your energy shields are admirable, but we defend against forces that can rewrite the laws of physics in local space. Vexhai's science officer suddenly spoke up from his station. Commander, I am detecting massive energy signatures throughout this star system. They appear to be... He paused, checking his readings again. Sir, there are dozens of vessels out there. All of them are larger than the ship we are facing, and their power outputs are... He looked up with terror in his eyes. The readings are impossible, sir. No ship should be able to generate that much energy. Captain Chen nodded as if this was expected. Those are our actual warships, Commander. They have been watching this encounter with great interest. Some of them wanted to end this conversation much earlier, but I convinced them to give diplomacy a chance. She touched a control on her chair, and the display behind her changed to show a tactical view of the solar system. Red dots appeared throughout the display, each one representing a human vessel. There were dozens of them, scattered from the inner planets to the outer asteroid belts. Each of those ships, Captain Chen said, carries weapons capable of cracking planets in half. Their defensive systems exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They are crewed by humans who have spent their entire lives preparing to fight enemies that your species cannot even imagine. Vexhai stared at the display in growing horror. His fleet of 12 ships, which he had thought would be more than sufficient to intimidate a primitive species, was completely outnumbered and outgunned by margins that defied comprehension. But here is what I want you to understand most clearly. Commander, Captain Chen said, her voice becoming deadly serious. We did not build these weapons because we enjoy violence. We built them because we had to. Because there are things out there in the dark spaces between galaxies that would end all life if they were not stopped. She leaned back in her chair, and some of the hardness left her expression. Your empire has been fortunate, Commander. You have expanded into regions of space where the truly dangerous predators do not hunt. You have encountered only species that were weaker than yourselves. But beyond the edges of your territory in the deep void where no stars shine, there are horrors that would make your entire civilization flee in panic. The human ship's massive weapon system finally powered down, the energy readings dropping to merely dangerous levels instead of apocalyptic ones. But the threat remained clear. Captain Chen had shown restraint, not weakness. So now you have a choice to make, she said. You can return to your empire and report what you have learned here. You can tell them that humanity exists and that we are not interested in conquest or expansion into their territory. We are here to guard against threats they have never imagined. And if we choose not to leave? Vexhai asked, though he already knew the answer. Captain Chen's expression became completely emotionless. Then you will discover why the things that hunt in the dark are afraid of us. 3 days later, Vexhai's damaged flagship limped through the outer edge of Zephyrian space. Emergency repairs had kept the vessel functional, but the perfect hole through its center served as a constant reminder of how quickly their superiority had been shattered. The other ships in his fleet maintained a protective formation around the flagship, but their crews were subdued and shaken. Word of what had happened at the human homeworld had spread through the fleet, despite orders to maintain communication silence. Everyone knew that their supposedly invincible weapons and shields had proven useless against a single human patrol ship. Incoming transmission from the Imperial Council, Kethra announced from her station. Priority override. They are demanding an immediate report. Vexhai straightened in his command chair, trying to project confidence he did not feel. The council would not understand what had happened. How could they? He barely understood it himself. Put them through, he ordered. the main display filled with the image of Counselor Zethmar, the most senior member of the imperial ruling body. His ancient face showed the wisdom of over 1,000 years of life, but also the arrogance that came from centuries of unchallenged power. "Commander Vexhai," the counselor said, his voice carrying the authority of the entire empire. "Your report is 3 days overdue. What is the status of the integration of the human homeworld?" Vexhai took a deep breath. "Counselor, the integration has not proceeded as expected. We have encountered complications." "Complications?" Zethmar's expression showed displeasure. "Commander, you were sent with sufficient force to integrate a primitive species. What complications could possibly arise from such a simple task?" "Sir, the humans are not primitive. Our intelligence assessments were completely incorrect. They possess technology that is far more advanced than our own." Silence filled the communication channel. Behind Counselor Zethmar, other council members came into view, their faces showing confusion and disbelief. "Commander," Zethmar said slowly, "are you reporting that your fleet was defeated by a species we classified as barely space-capable?" "Not defeated exactly, sir. But our demonstration of superior firepower was ineffective. Their defensive systems absorbed our plasma weapons without any visible damage, and their response—" Vexhai paused, trying to find words to describe what he had witnessed. "Their response demonstrated capabilities that exceed our understanding of physics." Counselor Zethmar's expression darkened. "Commander, are you suffering from some kind of mental breakdown? The Empire has never encountered a species with technology superior to our own. With respect, sir, that is no longer true. The humans have weapons and defenses that make our own systems look primitive by comparison. A single shot from what they classified as a point defense weapon nearly destroyed my flagship." The council chamber erupted in angry voices as the members began arguing among themselves. Vexhai could hear fragments of their debate: accusations that he was lying, demands for his immediate arrest, suggestions that he had suffered psychological damage from his defeat. Finally, Counselor Zethmar raised his hand for silence. "Commander, you will return to the capital immediately. The council will conduct a full investigation into your claims. If you are found to be fabricating this report—" "Sir," Vexhai interrupted, something he had never done before in his life, "I am transmitting all of our sensor recordings from the encounter. Please review them before making any decisions about humanity." He nodded to his communications officer, who began uploading the complete tactical records from their encounter with the human battleship. The data stream would show everything: the failure of their weapons, the impossible readings from human technology, and the evidence of dozens of human warships hidden throughout their solar system. As the data transferred, Vexhai continued his report. "Counselor, the humans have made it clear that they have no interest in expanding into Empire territory. They are not a threat to our existing colonies or trade routes, but they also made it equally clear that any attempt to conquer or integrate their worlds will result in our complete destruction." "You speak as if you believe they're threats," Zethmar said with contempt. "Sir, they are not threats. They are statements of fact. The humans have been preparing for warfare against enemies that we cannot imagine. Compared to those threats, the Empire would be a minor inconvenience." The data transfer completed, and Vexhai could see council members reviewing the sensor recordings on their personal displays. As they watched the footage of human weapons effortlessly penetrating Zephyrian shields and armor, their expressions began to change from disbelief to shock to fear. One of the younger council members spoke up. "These readings, they cannot be accurate. No ship can generate this level of energy output." "The sensors were calibrated and functioning normally," Vexhai replied. "I had my science team run diagnostics 3 times to confirm the accuracy." Counselor Zethmar was studying the tactical display that showed the positions of human warships throughout their solar system. "Commander, according to this data, there were over 40 vessels larger than your flagship hiding in their system. Is this correct?" "Yes, sir. And according to Captain Chen, those were their actual combat vessels. The ship we encountered was merely a patrol boat." The council chamber fell completely silent as the implications sank in. The Empire's expansion had been built on the assumption that they possessed the most advanced technology in the galaxy. The discovery of a species with vastly superior capabilities changed everything. "What are their intentions?" asked another council member. "Do they plan to expand into our territory?" They claim to have no interest in conquest or territorial expansion, Vexhai reported. Captain Chen stated that humanity's purpose is to defend against threats from beyond the galaxy. Threats that she described as far more dangerous than anything the Empire has ever encountered. Threats from beyond the galaxy? Counselor Zethmar repeated. What kind of threats? Vexhai summarized everything Captain Chen had told him about the enemies humanity had been preparing to fight. Self-replicating war machines, energy beings that existed in quantum states, hive minds that spanned multiple galaxies. With each description, the council members grew more silent and thoughtful. When he finished, the chamber remained quiet for several minutes. Finally, Counselor Zethmar spoke. Commander, you will return to the capital as ordered, but there will be no investigation into your conduct. Instead, we will be conducting an emergency session to discuss our response to this new information. What response, sir? The humans have demonstrated that they are vastly superior to us in terms of military capability, but they have also indicated that they are not interested in conquest. This suggests that diplomatic relations may be possible. Another council member leaned forward. Are you suggesting we negotiate with them as equals? I am suggesting we negotiate with them as our superiors, Zethmar replied grimly. The Empire has survived for 10,000 years by being practical above all else. We have absorbed weaker civilizations and avoided stronger ones. It appears we have encountered our first truly stronger civilization. But sir, protested a younger member, the Empire has never acknowledged any species as superior. Our entire governmental structure is based on Zephyrian supremacy. Then our governmental structure will adapt, Zethmar said firmly, because the alternative is extinction. Commander Vexhai, you will prepare a detailed diplomatic proposal. We will offer humanity a formal treaty of non-aggression and mutual respect. Vexhai felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. And if they refuse our offer? Then we will pray that whatever enemies they are preparing to fight never notice our existence, the counselor replied. Because if beings exist that are dangerous enough to require the level of firepower we witnessed, then the galaxy is a far more perilous place than we ever imagined. The communication ended, leaving Vexhai alone with his thoughts as his ship continued toward the capital. Through the viewport he could see the familiar stars of Zephyrian space, but they no longer seemed as welcoming as they once had. Somewhere out in the darkness beyond the galactic rim, threats existed that made humanity build weapons capable of cracking planets, and humanity, with all their terrifying power, was standing guard against those threats. For the first time in his 300 years of life, Vexhai was grateful that there were beings in the universe more dangerous than his own people, because if Captain Chen was right about what lurked in the void between galaxies, then everyone in the galaxy was going to need humanity's protection. The Empire would survive by adapting, as it always had. But it would never again assume that it was the strongest force in the galaxy. That assumption had died when a single human patrol ship had effortlessly shrugged off their most powerful weapons and responded with technology that defied comprehension. As his damaged ship limped toward home, Vexhai began composing the diplomatic proposal that would fundamentally change the Empire's relationship with the galaxy. They would approach humanity not as conquerors, but as petitioners seeking the protection of a vastly superior civilization. It was a humbling realization, but it was also their best hope for survival in a universe that had suddenly become much more dangerous and much more mysterious than they had ever imagined.